Hello and welcome to the Scraptastic Crocheter. My name is Amanda and today I'm gonna continue in the How to Basics series where I teach you how to crochet. Today my plan is to show you a granny square, and there's plenty of ways to make granny squares, but we're gonna make a simple granny square with no color changes, just a continuous square. And what you need is some yarn and a crochet hook. I'm gonna use this, it's a wool yarn and a 4mm crochet hook. And the only reason I'm using this wool, it's because it's just one strand. It's not a ply yarn, so I believe it's easier to see the stitches clearer on the camera. So first I'm gonna just do a simple loop, a slip knot, or what you like to call it, and then I'm gonna pull it up a little closer, or closing it up. I have made videos with the basic crochet stitches, or some of them. More videos are planned for more stitches, but all the stitches you will need is already in previous videos, so if you need to go look at that to learn these stitches more closely, then go ahead and do that. But we're going to start from here by chaining 3, so 1, 2, and 3 chains. Okay, and then I'm gonna insert my hook in the last stitch from the hook. That would be the 1, 2, 3, number 3, third stitch from the hook, and I'm gonna pull up a loop, and then I'm gonna go through the other loop I had. So I'm gonna have one loop left, and this is a slip stitch. From here I'm gonna chain 3 stitches, and I'm gonna yarn over to make double crochets. This chain of 3 here is gonna count as the first double crochet, but now I have yarned over, and I'm gonna go and find the middle here. And sometimes it's tricky because you see that this part here looks like a big hole. That's not where I want to go, because that's where I inserted the last time. I want to go in between all these chains here, so there's actually another middle. Let's see if I can show it to you easier. It's in here. If you have a hard time feeling that you can't find this, you can also do a chain 4 in the beginning, but it is down in the middle. So that will give me, when I'm putting the hook in here, I will have more loops that I'm going through to pull up the yarn. So double crochets is what we're doing. So when we pull up the loop from the middle here, we yarn over first, go into the center hole, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, double crochet. Yarn over, go in the middle, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. Now we have 3 double crochets. This first counts as a double crochet, so that means 3 double crochets. Okay, so far so good. Now we're gonna chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and we're gonna do more double crochets. This yarn tail here, I like to crochet over it, which means hide it in the stitches I'm making. So when I'm yarning over to go into the center and pull up a loop, I will be hiding this yarn tail along the chain that I started with. This is optional, that's just how I like to do it. But we're doing 3 more double crochets here. 1, 2, and 3. What we did with the chains is a corner, okay? This granny square is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to be a square. So the chain is the first corner. Now we're going to do the second corner. And we're going to chain 3 again. 3 chains and 3 double crochets again. 1, 2, and 3 double crochets, and chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. And we have done 2 corners and 3 sides, and to make a square you need 4 sides. So another set of 3 double crochets, 1, 2, and 3 double crochets. So we've made 3 corners and 4 sides. So we have to make the last corner by doing the 3 chains, and then we're going to connect it to this first side, and we're going to look here, and you see you have the top of the stitch there, and then you have the top of the stitch there, and then here is the top of the chains. So I go into the top of the chains and I do a slip stitch. That means I go in, I pull up a loop, and I pull that same loop through the loop I already had on my hook. That's a slip stitch. Now I'm gonna do slip stitches again because I want to position myself in this corner. I like to work out of corners. So I'm gonna get myself over to this corner by inserting my hook in the top of the next stitch here and do a slip stitch, and then in the next stitch I'm going in and I'm gonna do another slip stitch, and then I'm gonna do a slip stitch here into the corner space. So now I am in the corner. Just tightening it up a little bit, but I have my first square part here. Okay, next round is starting with 3 chains, and this is count as the first double crochet, and we're gonna make 3 more double crochets. When you do these type of 3 double crochets together like this, they're often nicknamed or called granny clusters. So if I say granny cluster, that just means 3 double crochets together, as in next to each other in the same space, because we're working in this chain space. That's what it's called, the space inside of chains. The corners are chain spaces. And I'm gonna move this over a little bit because this is the corner, and I'm now gonna make a new corner because we want to continue this as a square. So I'm gonna chain 3, and then I'm gonna do a granny cluster in the same chain space. So in the same space as we already did a granny cluster, we're making the next granny cluster. This will give us a new corner. You see the corners, and this corner is just on the next row. So now we're just working our way out. So now I've done 1 cluster, I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to prepare to make another double crochet. I'm not going to do anything about the stitches here. I'm going to jump over to the next chain space, which in this case is the next corner, and do another granny cluster, so 3 double crochets, and this is a corner, so we need to make a new corner, so that's 3 more chains and another granny cluster, so 3 more double crochets in this chain space. There we have another corner. Okay, and after that we chain 1, and we repeat this in every corner. Granny cluster, chain 3, and another granny cluster. There we go. And in between we chain 1, and then we jump over to the next corner. Just gonna get some yarn out there, so here we go, another cluster. As I mentioned, there's different ways of making granny squares. Just finishing this corner off. And this is just one type of granny square. And it's a good way to start learning the squares. So we're gonna chain 1 again, and now we're gonna go find the top of this chain 3, and we're gonna slip stitch into it to close off this round. And just like we did on the previous round, we're gonna slip stitch our way through to the chain space in the corner. Okay, this round is going to be different since now we have these corners, but we also have these on the sides. We're always going to have the 4 corners, but the holes on the sides here is going to increase by every row we grow this square. So there's going to be more and more of the side holes, but other than that it's all about like the same. So we're gonna chain 3 here to start off this granny cluster, and there we have this cluster down. And if you feel like it's feels like it's twisting on looking wonky, it could be that your corners, the clusters on the corners, just needs to be adjusted a little bit, because sometimes you can feel like they don't really have enough space, or that when you crochet that they don't like get lined up or straighten out just like a corner should be. Because when you just put it down like this, the corner or the sides of the square are like this, but this part here, if you actually look at it, it looks a little bit slanted. And to have it straight, so you get straight corners and straight edges, you want to try and align it like this, and just sliding it a bit on the chain space, or on the chain here in the corner, will make sure that your edges and corners get more straight and not twisting. So another cluster here to finish this corner off, and just like before, we're gonna chain 1, but now we're not going into the corner, we're going into this space here, and we're gonna do a cluster in that space. 1, 2, 3, and chain 1. So that's the side. We're only gonna put 1 cluster in that one because sides only require 1 cluster. The 2 clusters chain 3 is only for corners, okay? You just have to do a lot of corners in the beginning when it's basically just corners. But now we're starting to work up sides, and that is just 1 cluster in each chain space. But now we're back on a corner again, so 2 clusters, chain 3, or 1 cluster, chain 3, and another cluster, so 2 clusters in the chain. And chain 1, and then 1 cluster here in the side. So I'm going to continue working my way around, putting a cluster and a chain 1 in the sides and the corner clusters and the chain 3s. I'm going to let you watch me do it. But I figured I'd talk a little bit more about the different granny squares, because it's kind of, to me, it's a little bit funny that this, to me, in Swedish, is not just a granny square. We say basically maternal grandma square, but we have a special word for it. We don't say just grandma, we say mormor or farmor, and farmor is father's mother, and mormor is mother's mother. So this to me is a mormors ruta, which is a granny square in Swedish, and the farmors ruta, which is the other type of granny square, it looks different. It's also a granny square, but it's the one that doesn't really go for the clusters like this. I will make a tutorial showing how to make that type of square as well, but it's basically the square that doesn't have a hole. It's like a filled in granny square where you work in every stitch and not in the chain spaces. So for those who know the different types of granny squares, I believe you understand what I'm talking about, but you don't get the holes like this. You get like full rows of stitches, and then you only get holes in the corners. So it looks different, and unfortunately I don't have any nearby that I could show you easily right now. You'll just have to wait for that tutorial where I'll teach you how to make farmorsruta. So here we go. Now we worked our way all the way around, and you just do a slip stitch here in the top of the chain 3 of the beginning of the round. I think you can see I haven't pulled too much on the corners, but do you see that this corner is like it's almost rounding itself, and the same here, that they're, I don't know, that you have this little like rounding part. It's not like a perfect square. If you pull it out a little bit, you get more of a square, but when you have these corners tilting like this, the result can be a bit of a, like the square looks like it's twisting on itself if you make a large square, and it's only the corners. Like if you pay attention to the corners and pull at them little bit on every row, you will get a more of a perfect square. I know that there's also a technique where you instead of just continue working in the round, when you finish a row like this, that you would chain and turn your work and work on the back side every other row. So you work on the one way like this, and when you finish the row you turn it again. That also makes your finished item more of a perfect square. If you work with a yarn that changes colors by itself, I don't really recommend turning your work, because the colors might look a bit off. They don't get the same flow as when you work in a continuous spiral. I have a video where I show my Christmas sweater that I made with the hobby yarn. I can actually show you. I have a cake of that yarn, but it changes colors, and I changed rows, or I turned my work on every row, and the back seam, it's a straight line, but if you look at the videos on that, you will see that the colors, well, how the colors are like acting up, or not acting, how they're acting, not acting up, I'm sorry. But let's continue here. Go back to working slip stitches here to work my way to this corner, and like before, chain 3 and 2 double crochets and 3 chains, 2 double crochets, 3. I am rambling, losing track, sidestepping. I'm sorry. I am very excited to do this. Like, I love to crochet, and I just want to share so much with you. Chain 1. Here you can now see that we have the corner, and then we have 2 chain spaces on the side. So that means we're going to put a cluster in each of these, and then a corner, same way as we've done all the other corners. Put a cluster in this one. 1, 2, 3, and chain 1, and 1, 2, and 3, and chain 1, and into the corner we go to make another corner, another cluster, chain 3, cluster, 1, 2, 3 chains, and 1, 2, and 3 double crochets. Okay, now I'm just gonna put it down here so you can see we have the 2 corners, and if I'm gonna do like this, you'll see the row here on the bottom. We have 2 chain spaces and 2 corners. On the row up top that we just made, we have 2 corners and we have 3 chain spaces. So on every row we increase with 1 more cluster, and we have 4 clusters here. Here we have 3 clusters. And this is how you make a basic granny square. You just continue to make clusters and some chain stitches. And you can do a lot of different things with the squares like this. You can do one big large square blanket, which is really a good thing to do when you're not sure of how much yarn you have and how far you'll be able to use the yarn you have. if you start with a square and work from the center out, you just work until you either get to the desired size or until you run out of yarn, and it's easier to see if you can like do one more row or such when you realize that the yarn ball is getting smaller. But you can also make plenty of small squares. I can actually show you, I have a little poncho here with squares that I have put together to make a kid-size poncho. And here I have used 4 different colors. On the purple squares, I started with the light purple in some of the squares and the dark purple in some of the squares, and I just switched on every row. So and I did the same with the minty turquoise colors, but I have the dark in the center on 2 and the light in the center of 2, and then I stitched them together, and I did that on the back side so that I get a pretty neat seam, but it's not like it doesn't show on the front how I sewed them together. Something that's probably not very fun when you use different colors is all the sewing in the ends. I did not jump the yarn from row to row. I did the first round and then I cut the yarn, and then I did the second round and I cut the yarn. So I did that all the way through. So on every square I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds, and they start in one point and they end. So I have 10 threads or yarn ends to sew in on every square. Not the most fun thing I've done, and not something I really enjoy doing, so I try to stay out of doing it. Of course it can be relaxing to sew in yarn ends as well, but it's not my favorite thing to do. That's one of the reasons I like to do one big continuous granny square like this, and it's more fun to do it with a yarn that changes colors, because then it does the work for you. You don't have to really think about what colors to use, or that you have to switch yarn to sew in the ends and all of that. So I like these colorful yarns that just makes it a little bit more simple. But of course, I'm up for a challenge, so I'm not gonna say that I'm never gonna do squares and sew them together and all of, yeah, I'll show you. I'll make it. I have plans to make plenty squares, and I have some other type of squares laying around. I can show you 2 types of squares I think I have. Here's why. Actually 3 types of squares. I have a willow square, and I have another type of square that I don't know the name of, and I have a mosaic crochet technique. This is called a hope square, and this pattern is made by Tina from Iceland. And you work one color around, so you alternate colors and you move up on the back. I like this kind of technique because I don't have to cut the yarns and sew in so much. So in this case I only had a like beginning and end thread in 2 colors. So yeah, there's plenty of different types of squares, different sizes of squares and different things you can do with squares. I can't help myself laughing at myself right now. I'm losing track of what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to make this square. I wanted to teach you how to do this. And I'm talking about other squares. And that's maybe confusing you. And that's not what I was planning to do. But here we are anyway. Yeah. So I'm back at the beginning now. And slip stitch, slip stitch, slip stitch to the corner. And I wanted to show you something that you might not like with color changing yarns and slip stitching your way to corners like this. And that is, if your yarn changes color, you will see this, the slip stitches will be more visible. So that is something that could be just like good to know. I don't mind, because in the big picture, when you have a large square, you will not really notice this. You will just see it when you're sitting here working on it and just having it up in your face. But it's not going to be something very noticeable when you have your whole finished piece of item, blanket, sweater, cardigan, top, whatever it is you're doing. All of the small details that you see when you're working on the project will not be visible, unless it's really bright difference of color, that it's yellow on black or black on yellow, or you know, very high contrasting colors. Then you might see it a bit more than what you're doing here, because you see this next round is darker. It's gonna come a cluster here, and it's gonna be tightened up here or closed off. You're not gonna really see it, okay? Don't worry about it. I know it's easy to be a perfectionist about what you're doing, but just relax and have fun. It will be gorgeous either way, okay? So I might be crocheting too fast for you to be able to actually watch what I'm doing, but I'm not doing anything different from before. It's just one more cluster on this side than on the previous round, and then I'm doing corners, okay? So why am I teaching you the granny square? Why is that the item that I decided to jump onto just after teaching you basic stitches? Well, of course, it's a very versatile piece of fabric. With a granny square, you can do all sorts of things. I already showed you the poncho. You can make cardigans, you can make bags. All you need is your imagination and yarn and a hook. You can make a bunch of small squares and attach them together to make a big blanket or a cardigan, or more of a long jacket type, robe-esque piece of clothing. You can really do a lot with these squares, but they're so easy, and you don't even have to know what the finished item is going to be. Just make a bunch of squares and then figure it out when you look at them. do they feel like, oh, I want to be a piece of clothing, or I want to be a blanket? Is it an itchy yarn? Do you prefer to use it as something close to your skin or not? Maybe it's a bag. Maybe it's a very nice shopping bag. With the holes like this, it could be nice to have as a fruit bag. Maybe not without a lining if you're planning to put smaller items in it, but it's pretty easy to figure out what you want to do, or easy to like stitch them together. You can sew them together, you can crochet them together. There's plenty of ways to attach squares together, and I'm gonna show you some of my favorite ways, and also some ways I'm maybe not such a fan of later on. I'm just loving crocheting, and I have so many things I want to share. It just I'm sorry that I'm rambling, but it's just so much that I want to share that it's ridiculous. I don't know in what end to start. I don't know in what end to stop. But it feels like this video is a lot longer than it needs to be. So I'm gonna continue and just crochet this last row, or this last side on this square, and show you how this square looks after 1, 2, 3, 4, my 5th row. And you will also see that this color changing in this yarn is changing to lighter again. So we'll see how much you can see out of that row of slip stitches that I talked about earlier. And I'm just gonna, for the fun of it, make the slip stitches to the corner here, and you'll see that it's actually going the other way around now. It's going to be light on the darker yarn. You see here? Now it's light on dark, but the dark that's on the light, you can barely see it. You know it's there. No one else will see it. And from the back, it's barely visible either. You see the little, that's the back side of the stitch, and down here is the darker that's popping up there. It's really fun. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you can dig my craziness that I'm just a little bit all over the place, then please subscribe and come back for more videos, because I promise there's plenty more coming after this. Give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, whatever you feel like. Thank you very, very much for being here. I very much appreciate that. So bye for now, and have a great rest of your day.